Like many of you, I was glued to my television just a few short years ago when our next guest took home the title of Miss Universe 2018. And not only was I excited because she's an amazing woman, but she is Filipina like me. So I'd like to welcome, we're so excited to have her all the way from the Philippines, the one and only Catriona Gray, Miss Universe 2018.
It's such a pleasure to be here on the other side of the world, on the other side of the time.
Exactly. Listen, the pandemic has been tough, but at least it allows, technology anyway, allows us to be together maybe if we otherwise couldn't. So I do thank you and thank technology for bringing us together today. So this is, you know, the Mabuhay Philippines Festival is perhaps one of the biggest and certainly one of the most revered Filipino festivals in all of Canada, certainly the largest. You have a lot of Canadian fans out there, and I know you have visited Canada before. What have your impressions been of this country?
Well, actually, I have very close family in Canada. They're in Burlington. So I've spent upward of 2 months there, and I really loved it. I love the people. There's a lot of Filipinos, so I don't feel like I'm far from home. And it reminds me a lot of Australia, where I grew up as a child. So definitely counting the months until I can visit my family back there again.
Yeah. And so moving along in your story, you, as you said, you grew up in Australia. I know your father is Australian of Scottish descent. Your mother is Filipina.
Yes.
You decided to move to Manila after graduating school, high school that is, to pursue modeling. And you know, if you think back at that time, it was a long time ago and yet not a long time ago, I guess, in many ways. And you probably had like stars in your eyes. And, you know, do you remember that excitement, those butterflies in your stomach? And what made you decide like that was going to be the move, Manila?
Well, it wasn't seen as a permanent move at the time. I wanted to explore having a gap year because I was very, very academically focused. I invested a lot of my effort in my high school years into my schooling, and so I was intent on going to university. I had my eyes set on a dual bachelor of journalism and science, and I had already enrolled and deferred for the year, so it was all set. But I guess growing up, I had always been told, oh my gosh, you should model, you have the height, you have the build, and I enjoyed being in front of the camera. So I said to myself, you know what, I'll do it for a year. I think a year is enough to tick that off my box and then to move on with whatever I want to pursue. But that's the thing, I actually came towards a crossroads, so it was more butterflies with nervousness rather than excitement, because it was my first adult decision of choosing to pursue a more creative path rather than one that I had set my eyes on for the most of my childhood, and that was going into university. And that was systematic, and this other route was quite free-flowing, and that freaked me out a little bit because I was not one to lean towards spontaneity. I really liked structure and things like that. But I couldn't deny that I really felt a sense of freedom, a sense of expression, and being able to pursue music and to pursue modeling and to pursue creativity. And so I decided to stay. And it's been a tumultuous couple of years before I got what people might see as my big break. But when I look back, I can see that all those challenges and all those growing pains and all those curves really prepared me to be able to do what I did at the Miss Universe competition.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I know it's only been a few years and it has been, I'm sure, a whirlwind, but for those who didn't already know you, it literally placed you on the world map. Like everybody across the world came to know Catriona Gray. And I remember, I think my cousins and I were all on a group chat. And that night when we were watching it from our own homes, when you know, the countdown was happening and you were now like top 10 or now you're top 5. Take us to that moment when you realized you're down to being one of the last 2 contestants. What is going on in your mind at that very moment?
Through my Miss Universe journey, when I graduated from the top 25 to the top 10 to the top 5 and eventually to the top 2, I would never have this commentary in my mind of saying, okay, they need to call my name, they need to call Philippines, otherwise I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, there was no such commentary in my mind. In fact, it was all just, I can't believe I've made it this far. I can't believe that out of 95 incredible women that I've made it to the top 10, to the top 5, to the top 2. So I just had this air of like, just gratitude. And I know that was my final answer, but I'm so serious when I said, and you can see it in my face. When I look back at the footage, yeah. I don't look like a bunch of nerves. I look almost calm because I already knew in that moment when I was holding Miss South Africa's hands that I had given everything. I had done everything to my best of ability. And there was no thought that like, I could have done this better. Did I do enough? Like, none of that was there. And so that was just how I felt. I was just like, I can't believe that I brought Philippines this far. And I was honestly content. If my performance had earned me the first runner-up placement, I would have been content because I had given everything. There was nothing that I held back. And so, yeah, that was my state of mind.
Wow. Well, in the moment, obviously, when they called your name and you became Miss Universe, I know that there was a collective screaming that could be heard around the globe, not only in the Philippines, but in the Philippine diaspora with all of us around the world. What were some of your, you know, highlights in achieving that kind of, you know, status as Miss Universe? You get access and the abilities to live out, I'm sure, some of your biggest dreams. So what do you remember in that year after that win that really, really stands out to you as like, yeah, this is what this was going to be about?
It was definitely the notion that like this wasn't just for me. To see and witness the amount of pride I was able to bring my country and the amount of push I was able to give to my causes and the things that I believed in made it all worth it. Because that's what I wanted to get out of this, because I always pursued pageantry with the goal in mind to use its platform. I never wanted it to be like, I mean, it comes with it, the glam and, you know, the photo shoots and the exposure for yourself. But I really took it to heart that I was representing a country. Like every step of the way when I competed, I wanted to share about our culture and about the unique things that our country has to offer. Even during my reign, it was very important to me to always give my voice back to the Philippines and to always contribute back to the Philippines. So one of the most defining moments definitely was, the support I received, and 2, the work I believe I was able to do through my different positions as a spokesperson for different organizations, and being able to travel across different countries for that was really eye-opening for me. And I felt like it really enriched me as a spokesperson. Now that I'm back in the Philippines, it really opened up my eyes to what life is like over different cultures, over different country borders. And so it's really just given me that opportunity to, I believe, be even a platform now without Miss Universe, but on my own, and to use it for something good.
I've got 2 last questions for you, and I'm really curious to hear your answers to them. There is a movement happening across the globe right now, and it's a push for more diversity and representation, and particularly for people of color in positions of power and in positions of high visibility and in positions of high impact. You know, you are like me, we are biracial women who identify very, very strongly, you know, with our culture. What have you seen that has maybe changed in the time, that whether it has been through pageants or since winning Miss Universe, like, are things getting better in terms of opportunities for people of color, for the respect and the opportunities of very high profile jobs? I mean, clearly, you know, you broke through boundaries to get to where you are today, but what else needs to happen? And are we getting better in achieving that kind of equality, do you think?
I think we're definitely getting better, but I do believe there's a lot of work still to be done. I feel like there has never been such a high level of dialogue and awareness surrounding these type of issues, including diversity and inclusivity. And obviously every time is a good time to have them, but the fact that they are being so amplified now over so many different countries, I think is a really positive thing. And you know, it really lends its voice to different things. It's not just about diversity in ethnicity. It's also about diversity when it comes to the LGBTQ community. It's also about women's rights. It lends its voice to so many different minority groups. And I feel like that's the beauty of it, because when you heighten one voice of one community, you also in itself like heighten the voice of another, because they all are facing not exactly the same plight, but they're fighting for something. And that's the whole point. So I feel like we are getting better. There is definitely work to be done. And yeah, I just hope that people of influence, like you have your influence with this show and your platforms and your circles, just as I have influence with my same circles and platforms, that as long as we continue voices to be heard, whether it be our own or someone else's, we still need to fuel the dialogue in our own ways and allow those people to be seen.
And lastly, what is next for Catriona Gray?
Well, like everyone, I think I'm just trying to make the most of the new normal. I have a book that I'm working on. It's my first ever book, so that's very exciting to me.
Congrats.
Because I've always really, thank you. I've always really looked up to the mentors in my life, and I hope that this book could be the voice of a mentor to somebody. I'm also working on projects with the National Commission of Culture and Arts in the Philippines. I'm hoping to shed light on our culture and really share to the younger generations the importance of falling in love with what we have to offer as a country, and hoping that those traditions will not be dying traditions. And also I'm continuing my spokesperson work with different organizations. I continue to work with Young Focus, which is an educational NGO here in Manila. I'm the global ambassador for Smile Train. And also, I'm also a HIV and AIDS advocate. So just continuing to try and do as much work as I can from the safety of my home, and continue to use my platform to really give voices to the communities that need it at this time.
So Catriona, we know that in this pandemic, as you've mentioned, so many of us are lucky, many people are lucky to have the safety of their home, while other people are literally putting their lives on the line to keep the rest of us safe and to make sick people hopefully healthier. This is a show today that is dedicated to the frontline workers, not only here in Canada, of which there are many Filipinos, but around the world. So do you have a message for those frontline workers who are literally putting their lives on the line to make sure that we are safe?
Yes, I want to take this opportunity to honor them, to honor all of our frontliners that are watching at the moment. Thank you so much for your duty, for your sacrifice, and for your service, for your whole community, and also for your families. I know that being safe at home for us means that you go out on the front lines every day, that you put yourself in harm's way, you put yourself out to service, and you never ask twice. It's just something that you got to do because you feel compelled to serve. And I hope that we will never forget the service that you have rendered for us. And I hope that our younger generations and also everyone today will look up to you as something to aspire to be the exemplary standard of what we should aim to be as people who serve the community as a whole.
I appreciate that, and I know they will as well. Thank you so much for the generosity of your time. Again, all the way on the other side of the globe in the Philippines. And you know, on behalf of the whole community, we are so proud of you, and you're a very proud representation of the Philippines. So thank you so much for everything that you do and continue to do. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for your time. It's an honor to have a chat with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Hey.
Not only is this Mabuhay Philippines Festival a first because it's virtual and it's online, and normally we're used to having hundreds of thousands of people together, here's another first for you. This is the chance where we get to have 4 on-air personalities on television together for this virtual festival. And here's the thing that binds all of us. We are all either all or part Filipina. I want to welcome Pauline Chan from CTV News, Zoraida Allman from CTV News, and Kayla Williams from CP24. Welcome, ladies. It's a first.
Hello. This is definitely a first.
Here.
And I want to start there because, you know, we're going to go through your life stories in a moment and how we all got here. But the fact that we're all here is something so historic in so many ways, because the conversations that certainly industry people in television and journalism are talking about is diversity, representation, inclusion. So I'm going to start with you, Pauline, and I say this with the utmost respect. You were one of the first women that I saw on television that looked like my family, and you were a trailblazer in so many ways because of that. And you are of Filipino and Chinese descent. Take us back to you breaking into the industry. How easy or difficult was that for you?
I think I had a lot of good timing. I'm ethnically sort of Chinese and Filipino, but my dad is ethnically Chinese, raised in the Philippines, so he's pretty Filipino too. And when I got into journalism school, and I was finishing journalism school in the late 80s, early 90s, it was around the time when I think a lot of people were becoming more aware, more sensitive to the idea of seeing diversity on television, seeing our population, our multiculturalism reflected in the newscasters on air. So I do remember I had done my internship with Global and was ready to move on to a reporting job, and something came up at CFGO, CTV Toronto, and I remember people at the time were very supportive. There was a graduate from Humber College, which is where I went for journalism school, and she kind of took me under her wing And when the opening came up here, she encouraged me to pursue it. I have to say that through the years, people have been very encouraging, and I haven't necessarily felt it was because I represent ethnic diversity. They always made me feel like I was being promoted because I deserved. And I'm very grateful for people who gave me opportunity to try new things and supported me. And I think that was a really key development in Canadian broadcasting.
Wow. Yeah. Well, like I said, a trailblazer in so many ways. It's very encouraging to hear that story, actually. Zoraida, I'm going to move to you for a second because we actually worked together for a short time at the City TV CP24 days. It feels like a lifetime ago. And I remember back then, it was my mom who actually said, Lisa, because she calls me Lisa, you have to ask Zoraida. I think she is Filipina.
That's so
and I
cute.
said, okay, Mom, I'm pretty sure she is too, but I'll make sure. And so, you know, this is how I remember that you were probably one of the first full Filipina women that I had not only watched on television, but got the pleasure to work with as well. Is your story similar to Pauline's in the sense that, you know, you came to Canada very, very, very young from the Philippines, and certainly, you know, grew up with the full Canadian sensibility. Was the trajectory similar for you to Pauline, or did you have different experiences?
I think it's funny that you say that, because I know when we both worked at City TV, there was a time there when there were actually quite a few Filipinas on the air at that station. And I know I would remember going out on stories and I would get taken, I would be mistaken for another Filipina who worked at City TV on the air. And then I would sort of relay my story and they would say, well, yeah, I know, same thing happened to me, except they thought that, you know, they thought that I was you. And so it would like mix up all the time. And it was kind of it was a unique time. And it was actually, I cherish those days back a lifetime ago, right, Melissa?
A lifetime ago.
Absolutely. Yes, I mean, I don't know, when I think back to my trajectory, I went to Ryerson, I stayed in the city, which I think, I mean, for me, I feel very lucky that I was able to stay in the city. I fully expected that I would have to leave, you know, the GTA, you know, get some experience under my belt and then come back. But, you know, as you say, back then, other than Pauline and maybe a few others, there weren't a whole lot of people who looked like me, you know, or you, or Kayla, any of us on the air. And so I tried to be really positive about that. Maybe it was of my own naivete at the time, but I thought, you know what, stations, newsrooms need people who look like me. So I'm just gonna go after it, right? Just gonna go get it. I was spending so much time at Rogers Television when I was in university, pretty much doing it because I loved it. It was a lot of fun. And then strangely enough, I got a phone call from the program director at the Weather Network. And he had seen me on the cable station and had asked if I wanted to come in and do an audition to do the weather. And I was like, sure, you know, I know nothing about weather, but hey, yeah, I'll come. And so I went, did the audition. He was like, I think you're great. We're going to train you. You know, you're going to know everything you need to know about the weather to come and work here. And so I sort of started my route that way. And then from there, I jumped to Global News. And then I went to City TV, which is where I worked with you, Melissa. And then I went back to Global News. And then I ended up here at CTV News Toronto. So I guess you could say I've kind of done the rounds. For the most part, I would have to say the same as Pauline. Like, my experiences have been fairly positive, but it might have a lot to do with your mindset as well.
Which now this brings us to Kayla, your story, because you had a very different path to journalism here in Toronto, which had you go through the United States, not only as a professional athlete, but also in sports reporting, and then eventually back up here. And also, if I can make mention, with your background, you're mixed, like I am mixed, and you are Filipino and Jamaican and Lebanese. And what I find fascinating about that is that you actually occupy several realms as a result of that. Like, to me, you pass very much as Filipina. So the discussions, however, today that we're having in the news, I know they are hitting you quite differently, perhaps, than they're hitting me or Zoraida or Pauline. So your path to where you are today, give us a little taste of how it is that you ended up here today.
Yeah, you know, it is such a full circle moment now as I look back on the last 10 to 12 years, because I'm a Scarborough kid through and through. I was born and raised in the city of Toronto. I was actually raised by my Filipino grandparents, and my mother is Filipina and my father is Jamaican, and but my mother died at a really young age when I was 3, and so my Lolo and Lola, they raised me from the get-go, and so I always laugh like inside whenever I tell somebody or they come up to me and they ask me, are you Filipina? And I'll be like, I'll nod, I'm like, yes. And they're like, Talaga? And I'm like, yeah. But my story did start here in the city. And then, yeah, I was fortunate enough, I got a volleyball scholarship down to the United States. So I left the city in 2005. I was 17 years old, and I packed my life up and I went down to the United States on a volleyball scholarship. And then that led me into the industry stateside, where I got my first job as a anchor reporter for an NBC affiliate in a small market in Northwest Louisiana. But it really gave me the grounds to make my mistakes, to get my feet wet, and to just really get that experience under my belt. And then that transitioned into some freelance sports reporting when I was in Atlanta, Georgia, getting my master's degree at Georgia State University. So I had a very unconventional route. You know, a lot of people in our industry typically go to school within, in Ontario, or at least in Canada, and they kind of go through the different markets in our country. But for me, I was actually stateside for many, many years. And then I actually decided to take a break from broadcasting. And I went and played professional volleyball in the Philippines. And so that was in 2015. And it was such an incredible experience for so many reasons, because not only was I able to fulfill a dream of mine from an athlete standpoint of playing at the professional level, it just so happened to be literally my mother's home country. My first time ever going back home, meeting relatives, distant relatives, and some of my Lola's sisters and my tipos and titas that I'd never met. And it still gives me chills to this day, because I was able to meet them, and some have now passed. And if I didn't have that experience looking back in 2015, it just makes it that much more special. And then also too, to just literally see where my mother was born, where my grandparents were born. My grandfather is from Gapan City. My grandmother is from Pampanga. I hope I'm saying them right. I know I'm terrible. My Tagalog needs some work, but
it's 100% better than mine.
But yeah, it was so nice. I essentially lived in Manila for just under a year, and it was a beautiful experience. And then I was able to come back, and then long story short, I returned home, worked for the CFL, and then that ultimately led me to where I am now, and that's at CP24. So I've been working for Toronto's Breaking News now for just under 4 years, and it's been an amazing journey, because, like I said, being a kid right from the city of Toronto to come back and work in the market that you were raised in, that I watched. And so I take pride in the fact that I represent little Filipino children, but I also represent little Jamaican children as well. The black and brown children that when they look at the camera and they're like, I didn't see that before. And when they see a bit of a reflection on their television, I think that's an excellent thing, and it needs to continue to happen.
Generally, talking about a community celebrating itself and celebrating those who have accomplished things and represented the culture so well. Pauline, why is it important for you to continue to be a part of this festival and really literally put your face out there?
Well, first of all, it's fun. Filipinos throw great parties. They have great food. They love to dance and sing. So why not enjoy that?
I think the one thing that Filipinos do well, it seems, at least in my experience, and it sounds like maybe in all of yours as well, is to support when they see one of their own. Have you experienced that and getting that support from this community?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Every now and then I'm contacted by, a Filipino organization or, an organization that wants to, you know, showcase Filipino talent and journalists, and I'm always happy to take part, because I do think, as Pauline said, it's important, and as we're all saying, it's important to, you know, remember your heritage and your roots. Like, my parents always spoke Tagalog in the house. Same with, you know, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents when they were still alive. My grandfather would not speak to us unless we spoke to him in Tagalog.
Oh, hardcore.
It was funny to think back, because, like, I mean, I won't even give you a sample of what it sounds like to speak. It was very broken, just sort of like nouns, and, you know, but like he would get the point. But I mean, it was funny. It was funny then, and I didn't understand it now, but I'm kind of really grateful for that, because I still, you know, I still feel a lot of the culture inside of me. But when I look at my daughter, I mean, she, you know, was born here. We speak only English in the house. You know, my husband is Caucasian. She's growing up in a very, you know, she's missing that sort of part of her heritage growing up. And so I think for myself, you know, keeping my foot in there and staying involved, I'm sort of like taking her along with me and sort of trying to make sure that that culture is still sort of there.
I hear you. And I'm in also a similar situation, because I'm half Filipino, and therefore, because, you know, math, my daughter's a quarter Asian, and yet she's being raised with so much of her Filipino family as well. And that's the whole reason. Obviously, that's her family, but it's also understanding that you might only be a quarter Asian and you are going to probably pass as white in this world, but that doesn't mean that that is not in your blood. We talk about bloodlines a lot in our household. You know, I want to end with bringing it back to the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic, and that we are in fact dedicating this entire virtual festival to frontline workers. And before I ask you to sort of ponder a message to frontline workers, you know, I would like to say that why I'm so proud that we've assembled this amazing group together is because part of representation is also breaking down stereotypes. And hopefully in breaking down those stereotypes, you can contribute to also, you know, breaking down racism. And, you know, for many people who are exposed to Filipinos, there's a huge swath of them who believe we're a monolith, or that we are only nannies, or we are only, you know, caregivers, or we're only nurses. And we are those things, but we are also so much more as well. And we are diverse in and of itself. And the fact that we have all of us together helping to break those stereotypes and literally show different faces to the culture is something I'm really proud of. So to the frontline workers, of which we know there are so many hardworking, selfless Filipinos and more, I'll go around the world, if you will. Pauline, if you could give a message to the frontline workers who we are dedicating this show to.
Well, I guess I'm one of those quintessential stereotypical Filipino kids in that both my parents were healthcare workers. My dad was a doctor, my mom was a nurse, and they both passed away now. But when I look at all the pandemic measures, the hand washing, the disinfectant wipes, my mom used to do that all the time. If we traveled, she'd be wiping the hotel light switches, the doorknobs. And I marvel now that that came so naturally to her, that idea of cleanliness and not having any germs, and you know, you don't know who touched the light switch before you, so make sure you clean it for yourself. And so I think so much of my mom at this time. She passed away 20 years ago right now.
Wow.
And my dad passed away a couple of years ago. So I feel a personal closeness to the frontline workers, not just in healthcare, but also in other areas, in transportation, in food services, all those sorts of areas that we realize now are so vital in all of our lives. So I take my hat off to all the Filipinos who've been supporting all of us through this pandemic.
And Zoraida?
I have to say my family kind of breaks that stereotype of healthcare workers, because none of my siblings went into healthcare. My parents were not in healthcare. All my aunts, though, are. So, you know, and I have to say, you know, for going back to memories, I do remember a hospital stay after I had my daughter. I had some complications, and I was there for about a week. The two nurses that were caring for me happened to be Filipina, and they were just, to this day, I cannot thank them more for how they were so kind and just so mothering of me. One of them even brought me a little bowl of tinola. So to all the healthcare workers out there, be proud of who you are and what you do. We thank you so, so much, and we see you. We see what you guys are doing every day, and you are a huge part of why we are beating this virus here in Ontario and in Canada, and why we're flattening the curve. And you know, it's that attention and that love and that care that you put into your jobs every day, despite the risks that you are taking, that like we bow down to you. So thank you so much.
Kayla, you know, Toronto already knows how your face and how much you've been doing to provide that information as well. But what is your message to frontline workers?
Yeah, I think Zoraida and Pauline summed it up perfectly. But like ultimately, it's salamat po. Like salamat, salamat, salamat. We can't thank you enough for the tireless work that you all do. And the thing is that I guess unconventional in my background, I didn't have a lola or a mom or a tita that was in the nursing or medical field, but it doesn't matter really, because like you said, there are so many hardworking Filipinos, and regardless whether it's doctor, nurse, whether it's caretaker, anything in the medical field, Filipinos play an integral role. And I think there should be a sense of pride in that as well, especially in the midst of literally a world pandemic. So it doesn't go without saying that we appreciate you, we thank you, and we of course are also thinking and praying for your safety as well as you go day in and day out into the trenches frontline. So thank you. Salamat.
And salamat to all of you. This has been a real treat for me personally and professionally to be able to assemble this amazing group together, you know, breaking boundaries. And what a real treat that normally our schedules and news and life would never let us get together this way. So it is an upside to having a virtual Mabuhay festival that we can actually do it this way. So to all of you, thank you for everything that you've done ahead of me, for what I think are collectively hoping to contribute and give to the next generation coming up behind all of us. So thank you, ladies. It's been a real pleasure and an honor.
Likewise.
Si, si, no, 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 no,